I stood in front of the mirror, but the reflection staring back at me was not that of a bride eagerly awaiting the most important moment of her life. I was not wearing the pristine white wedding gown that should have embraced my body, nor was I adorned with the elegant veil my mother had lovingly chosen for me. Instead, I was clad in a form-fitting black cocktail dress, my hair neatly pulled back, not the soft, cascading curls I had once envisioned for my wedding day. Because today I was not walking down the aisle to become the wife of the man I loved. I was here to expose him. Everything outside my dressing room was unfolding like a perfect wedding. My wedding to Ethan Williams, the rising star of Jensen and Marks, the man every woman dreamed of, was the talk of the city. The guests, a distinguished crowd of elite families, Ethan's powerful legal associates, and my colleagues from the museum had all arrived. They were here to witness a fairy tale wedding, but they had no idea they were about to become part of a very different kind of performance. The soft melodies of the string quartet drifted through the air, mingling with the cheerful chatter of the guests. I could picture the glittering reception tables, the champagne flutes sparkling in the hands of well-dressed men and women. Pristine white flowers lined the grand aisle, creating an almost unreal, dreamlike setting. But behind that dazzling facade lay a betrayal I could never forgive. 3 months ago, if someone had told me that Ethan was not the man I believed him to be, I would have laughed in their face. We had been together for 5 years, a relationship everyone deemed mature and stable. He was responsible, a man who meticulously planned for the future, never reckless, never superficial. People constantly reminded me how lucky I was to have someone like Ethan, successful, sophisticated, loving me with a steady, composed devotion, and I had believed them. Until one rainy December afternoon when I stumbled upon a handwritten card hidden in his desk drawer. It was not the official wedding invitation we had sent to over 300 guests. This one was different. It was handwritten, in Ethan's familiar script. "I need you there, front row, left side, this isn't over." Oh. That message was not meant for me, it was for Allison Carter, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. The woman he had once promised forever but ultimately left because they were incompatible. When I had asked him about Allison in the first year of our relationship, he had squeezed my hand tightly, his gaze sincere. "Future's just the past. You're nothing like her, you are my future." Those words echoed in my mind as I sat there, the cold paper in my hands. I could have thrown it away, I could have pretended I had never seen it. But instead I chose a different path. I wanted the truth. And the truth had led me to this very moment. My phone vibrated. A message from Olivia. My best friend and the maid of honor in this wedding. "She's here, just like you predicted, front row, left side. And guess what? She's wearing red." A faint smirk curled on my lips. Of course, Allison would choose red, the color of those who crave attention. I wondered if Ethan saw the irony in that. Another message popped up. "Ethan just arrived, he's asking around for you." Of course, he was looking for me. I glanced at the clock. 1 hour until the ceremony. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. I reached for the small clutch resting on the vanity and brushed my fingers over the USB drive inside. It held 3 months of my investigation. Text messages, emails, photos, surveillance footage capturing Ethan and Allison meeting at cafes, hotels, even in his office. I had spent countless sleepless nights piecing everything together, and now, the final picture was ready to be displayed. My eyes flickered to the white wedding gown hanging on the rack. A couture design worth over $80,000, custom-made from the finest fabrics. Weeks ago I had imagined wearing it, walking down the aisle under the admiring gazes of our guests. But now, it was nothing more than a mask, meant to conceal a lie. I picked up my clutch and headed for the door. Olivia was waiting outside, her gaze scanning me from head to toe, a mix of excitement and concern in her eyes. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. I smiled, adjusting my diamond earrings with steady hands. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, toward a wedding no one, not even the groom, could have anticipated. 3 months ago, when I first found that invitation in Ethan's desk drawer, I didn't confront him right away. I knew that if I did, he would deny it, twist the story the way he always did in high-profile cases, turning undeniable facts into trivial misunderstandings. But this time, I wasn't a weak witness under his manipulation. This time, I held the truth. And I was about to expose him perfectly. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, a half-finished glass of wine beside my laptop. The invitation lay before me, and I stared at the words Ethan had written. I need you there, front row, left side. This isn't over. I closed my eyes, trying to suppress the anger boiling inside me. Clearly, I had been nothing more than a fool, deceived all this time. But instead of letting my rage cloud my judgment, I decided to act. I started with the simplest thing, Ethan's phone. Ethan had always prided himself on his transparency. He never locked his phone around me, even leaving it on the table whenever he stepped into the shower. I knew the passcode, his own birthday. Once again, Ethan's overconfidence had become his biggest mistake. As he slept soundly, I quietly reached for his phone and opened his messages. I searched for Allison's name, but there was nothing. No surprise there, but I knew Ethan too well. If he was smart enough to cheat, he was smart enough to delete the evidence. So, I opened the deleted messages folder, and immediately I found exactly what I was looking for. Over 200 messages between Ethan and Allison. Promises, secret meetings, pictures from the very cities where he had claimed to be on business trips, and worse, messages from just a few weeks ago. Ethan, I told you she doesn't suspect a thing. We just have to wait until the wedding. Allison, are you sure? I don't want to be on the sidelines any longer. Ethan, everything is set. After the wedding, I'll have a legal reason to modify the prenup. Just be patient. I felt my blood run cold. Modify the prenup? What was Ethan planning? I kept digging, combing through his personal emails and stored documents, and then I found it. A revised draft of our prenuptial agreement. The new clause stated that after the wedding, if I voluntarily walked away from the marriage, I would forfeit any claim to Ethan's assets. I slowly set his phone down, feeling my pain harden into pure, unfiltered rage. He hadn't just betrayed me, he had intended to use our marriage as a legal tool to strip me of everything, ensuring he could walk away free and unscathed, straight into Allison's arms. No, I wasn't going to let that happen. The next day I met Olivia at a small cafe in the city. Olivia was the only person I trusted completely. When I told her everything, she didn't look surprised. I always had a bad feeling about him, Olivia said, gripping her coffee cup tightly. But what are you going to do, call off the wedding? I shook my head, slowly stirring my cappuccino with a spoon. No, calling off the wedding would be too easy for him. I want him to understand that he can't control me, that he can't turn me into a puppet in his story. I pulled a USB drive from my bag. I've backed up all his messages, emails, and documents from his phone, but that's not enough, I need more. Olivia raised an eyebrow. What exactly are you planning? I want to catch him and Allison in the act. I want video evidence, I want witnesses, and more importantly, I paused, my voice turning cold. I want to turn his wedding into the funeral of his reputation. For the next 2 months, I planned everything down to the last detail. First, I gathered evidence. I hired a private investigator to follow Ethan. Within a week, I had dozens of photos of him and Allison, meeting in secret, walking hand in hand into a luxury hotel, taking trips together while I believed he was working. Next, I found a way to access Ethan's digital footprint. With the help of a friend in IT, I gained access to his email account. I discovered suspicious financial exchanges between him and an offshore account. Evidence of financial fraud. As the wedding day approached, I hired an actress, Emily Dawson, a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to me from behind. Her role? To pose as me in the wedding dress. Olivia helped me connect with Emily. When I explained the plan, Emily let out a quiet laugh. So, I'm not just playing a bride, I'm playing a woman getting revenge. Sounds exciting. The final step was setting everything in place. I reached out to a group of financial journalists, reserving several guest seats for them. I wanted everything documented, not just by the wedding cameras but by people who could bring this story into the light. 2 weeks before the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror staring at my reflection. I was no longer a woman eagerly awaiting her dream wedding. I was no longer someone who believed in unconditional love. I was the woman who would expose a betrayer. I picked up my wedding dress, running my fingers over the soft lace. It was no longer a symbol of happiness. It was the final weapon I would use in this battle. The night before the wedding, Olivia texted me. He's at the hotel with Allison. Want me to live stream it? I smiled and replied, No, let's wait until tomorrow, when everyone is watching. The church was filled with soft melodic music. Guests were already seated on the long wooden pews adorned with white flowers and silk ribbons. From a distance I could hear their excited whispers, the admiration in their voices as they praised the beauty of the ceremony, the supposed lucky bride, who was about to marry Ethan Williams. If only they knew the truth, would they still be looking forward to this moment? I stood in a narrow hallway at the side of the church where dim light cast faint shadows against the dark wooden walls. My black cocktail dress hugged my body like armor, a stark contrast to the elegant wedding gown that Emily, the actress I had hired, was now wearing. Emily stood in the spotlight at the center of attention where all eyes were fixed. As the church doors swung open, she took my father's arm and slowly walked down the aisle to the soft organ melody. From behind, no one could tell it wasn't me. Ethan stood at the altar exuding confidence as if everything was going exactly according to his plan. He believed today was his victory, the day he would use this wedding to silence any doubts I had, finalize the revised prenuptial agreement, and then quietly remove me from his life to be with Allison. But what was about to happen would be nothing like what he imagined. I glanced at Olivia, who stood nearby, phone in hand, ready to send the signal at the perfect moment. Across the aisle I caught the eye of a photographer, the one I had arranged beforehand. He wasn't just here to take wedding photos. He was here to capture every moment of the performance Ethan and Allison were about to put on. Emily continued her slow ascent up the altar steps. I could see her hands gripping the wedding bouquet tightly. A small gesture, but enough for me to know she was just as nervous as I was. Everything was in place. Now, all that was left was for the villain to reveal herself. Just as the priest was about to begin the ceremony, a shrill voice cut through the silence. "Stop." The entire church froze. All eyes immediately turned toward the woman who had just stood up from the front row on the left. Allison. She was wearing a form-fitting red dress. A color entirely inappropriate for a wedding, but absolutely fitting for someone desperate for attention. "This wedding cannot happen," she declared, her voice trembling yet dramatic. "Ethan doesn't love Charlotte, he never has. His true love is me." A murmur of whispers spread through the crowd. Guests exchanged confused glances. I could see Ethan's mother whip her head toward him, her eyes filled with bewilderment. Ethan stiffened, but he recovered quickly. A man like him always had a backup plan. "Allison, don't do this," he said, his voice wavering just slightly, as if he were trying to regain control of the situation. "No, Ethan." Allison took a few steps forward, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, playing the role of a deeply wounded woman. "You don't have to hide anymore. I know you love me. I know you were planning to wait until after this was all over to tell her, but why should we wait? Why should you keep lying to yourself?" Some guests began pulling out their phones, recording the spectacle. It was becoming too dramatic to ignore. Ethan turned to Emily, the woman he still believed was me, and did exactly what I had predicted. He put on a show of heartbreak, pretending to be caught in an impossible dilemma. "Charlotte," he said slowly, his face twisted in supposed anguish, "I'm so sorry." In my mind I could already picture every rehearsed line Ethan had practiced for this moment, the way he would turn himself into the victim, a man trapped in a loveless marriage. "I can't lie to myself anymore," Ethan sighed, stepping toward Allison. "You're right. I love you. I never stopped loving you." Gasps of shock rippled through the church. A few guests had their mouths hanging open, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. I looked at Olivia. It was time. I gave her a slight nod. Immediately she sent the pre-written message. The entire church went dark. A startled hush fell over the crowd. Confused glances darted around the dimmed space. Then the massive screen behind the altar lit up. The first images appeared, Ethan and Allison walking out of a luxury hotel together. The next, them holding hands, kissing, traveling together on the very same dates Ethan had told me he was busy with meetings in Chicago. Then a voice echoed through the church, not the priest's but Ethan's. "She doesn't suspect a thing. We just have to wait until the wedding. After the wedding, I'll have a legal reason to modify the prenup. Just be patient." The entire congregation fell into stunned silence. Allison turned ghostly pale. Ethan stood frozen. And that was the moment I stepped out from the side hallway of the church. Under the lights clad in black, I was no longer a bride. I was the keeper of the truth. Ethan spun around, his face draining of all color as he laid eyes on me. Charlotte, he stammered, unable to believe what he was seeing. I took slow, deliberate steps forward, picked up the priest's microphone, and smiled. That was quite a speech, Ethan, but I think you forgot something important. I wasn't the one being abandoned. I was the one who planned all of this. The church was consumed by a heavy silence, so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. Ethan stood frozen, his eyes wide, his face drained of color. Allison was just as rigid, her fingers clenched tightly around her silver clutch, as if holding onto it could keep her grounded. They had believed this was their victory, that they had outmaneuvered me. But they were wrong. I took slow, deliberate steps forward, the sound of my heels echoing against the marble floor. Every eye in the church turned to me. The real bride, not the imposter standing at the altar in white. A few guests gasped, hushed whispers rippling through the pews like an incoming wave. Ethan stammered, scrambling to regain control. Charlotte, what are you doing? I took the microphone from the priest's hand, my voice calm but unwavering. No, Ethan, the real question is, how long did you think you could hide the truth? I nodded toward Olivia, who was already in position by the control panel. In a single moment, the massive screen behind the altar went dark before the first set of images appeared. The first photo, Ethan and Allison walking out of the Crescent Hotel, the very place he had told me he was attending an important business meeting. The next, a text message from Ethan to Allison. We just have to wait. After the wedding, I'll take care of everything. Then, the video began to play. The guests collectively held their breath as hotel security footage flashed onto the screen. Ethan and Allison hand in hand strolling through the grand lobby, their conversation intimate. The video continued, capturing them entering a suite on the top floor, the very room Ethan had booked 2 weeks in advance. All eyes turned to Ethan. He stared at the screen, then darted his gaze around the church, as if searching for an escape. But I wasn't finished yet. I signaled Olivia once more, and a series of emails appeared on the screen. An email from Ethan to his private attorney. I need the prenup revised. After the wedding, Charlotte will have no claim to my assets. I want her legally bound to a voluntary exit clause. An email from Allison. Are you sure? I don't want to be left behind again. Ethan's response. After the wedding, I'll make her leave on her own. Just wait. Shocked whispers rippled through the church. I could see Ethan's mother, Margaret Williams, gripping her fiancé's hand tightly, her face clouded with disappointment. But the hardest blow was yet to come. The screen shifted again. This time, it wasn't pictures or messages of infidelity. It was financial records. Spreadsheets, invoices, and a long list of suspicious transactions filled the screen for all the guests to see. Ethan's brow furrowed. What the hell is this? He muttered. I crossed my arms and met his gaze head-on. This is your financial record, Ethan, and in it are transactions that I find very interesting. One of the guests, Richard Palmer, the CEO of Jensen and Marks, the law firm where Ethan worked, suddenly shot to his feet. Wait a minute. His eyes locked onto the screen. These payments. This is company money. Ethan, did you use the firm's corporate credit card to fund your trips with her? Ethan's face turned ghostly pale. That's not... But before he could stammer out an excuse, an audio recording played through the church speakers. Ethan's own voice. No one will ever find out. I buried it under partner expenses. There's nothing to worry about, Allison. A few guests gasped. Some stood. Others turned to each other, murmuring in disbelief. Margaret clutched her chest, as if she might faint. But I wasn't done yet. The screen shifted once more. A list of investments Ethan had made through a shell company appeared on the screen. From the front row, a middle-aged man abruptly stood. William Carter, a senior attorney at the firm and one of the key overseers of financial transactions. What the hell is going on here? He demanded, his voice sharp. I turned my gaze to Ethan and spoke slowly, each word deliberate. Financial fraud, embezzlement of company funds, prenup manipulation, and I have proof of all of it. The tension in the church was suffocating. Ethan suddenly lunged toward me, panic flashing in his eyes, but before he could do anything, two men in black suits stepped forward. They were representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, men I had contacted beforehand. "Mr. Williams, you need to come with us." Ethan's face drained of all color, he thrashed against their grip. "No, I didn't do anything wrong. Charlotte, you can't do this to me." I met his frantic gaze, seeing the raw fear in his eyes. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice calm but unwavering. "You did this to yourself." The church descended into chaos. Allison had disappeared into the crowd, desperate to escape the humiliation. Ethan's family stood in shock, while his prestigious law firm teetered on the edge of scandal. And I stood there, in my black dress, watching it all crumble. Just as I had planned. Today was supposed to be my wedding day. Instead, it became the day Ethan Williams lost everything. Ethan struggled as the SEC agents tightened their grip on his arms, his face contorted with panic. The church buzzed with hushed whispers and gasps as the full weight of the truth sank in. His mother, Margaret Williams, collapsed into her seat, her trembling hands covering her mouth in horror. His father, a well-respected businessman in the legal world, stood frozen, his sharp eyes burning with fury. The most distinguished guests at the wedding, the elite partners of Jensen and Marks, now looked at Ethan with nothing but disgust. "You can't do this to me," Ethan screamed, desperately trying to break free from the two agents restraining him. "I'm a lawyer. I know my rights." One of the agents, a tall man with graying hair, merely shrugged. "Then you also know that when we have this much evidence, the only right you have left is to remain silent." Ethan's eyes darted frantically around the church, searching for an ally, someone, anyone to stand up for him. But no one did. I stood there watching everything unfold exactly as I had planned. The dreams Ethan once had of power, prestige, and wealth were now reduced to ashes before my eyes. Then, suddenly, Allison shot up from her seat. "This isn't my fault," she shrieked, her face pale with panic. "It was all him." But before she could say another word, one of the financial reporters I had invited stood up, holding his phone high, recording every second of the scene. "Ms. Allison Carter," he said, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "Can you explain the suspicious transactions linked to your accounts? The SEC has confirmed that you engaged in a series of insider trades using information provided by Ethan. Would you like to make a statement before you're placed under arrest?" "I don't know anything. I was just doing what Ethan told me," Allison stammered, stumbling backward, eyes darting wildly around the room. But no one believed her. No one. Near the church doors, two more FBI agents stepped inside. One of them pulled out an arrest warrant, his voice steady, firm. "Allison Carter, you are under arrest for insider trading and conspiracy to commit financial fraud." "No, I can't be arrested," Allison shrieked. But there was nowhere to run as the agents closed in on her. I watched as she was handcuffed and led out of the church, feeling nothing but a cold satisfaction. She had walked into this trap thinking Ethan would protect her. But Ethan couldn't even protect himself, let alone anyone else. Michael, Ethan's best man, began inching backward through the crowd, trying to slip away unnoticed. But I had already seen him. I glanced toward Olivia, who was already in position at the back of the church. She needed nothing more than a slight nod from me, and instantly, a new set of documents appeared on the screen. Wire transfers linked to Michael's real estate projects. Anonymous accounts used to launder money through fraudulent investment contracts. Ethan and Michael's signatures on the same documents, solid proof of their collusion. Michael turned pale, sweat dripping down his forehead. This can't be real." One of the FBI agents turned to face him. "Michael Reed, you are under arrest for money laundering, contract fraud, and aiding in illegal financial activities." "No, I had nothing to do with this," Michael shouted, desperately trying to escape, but there was nowhere left to run. I turned back to Ethan. He was still standing there, but now he looked like a trapped animal backed into a corner. "You planned all of this?" he choked out, his voice raw with fury. I stepped closer, letting him see me clearly. "That's right," I said softly, but there was no trace of mercy in my eyes. Ethan let out a bitter laugh, his gaze burning with hatred. "You think this will destroy me? You think a few videos, some stupid documents will take me down?" I simply smiled. "No, Ethan, this is just the beginning." A loud click echoed through the church as the FBI tightened the cuffs around his wrists. Every pair of eyes in the room remained locked on Ethan as he was led away, His dreams of power and prestige had crumbled in the very place where he thought he would claim his greatest victory. But instead of a grand and powerful wedding, Ethan Williams received a federal indictment in the very church where he believed he had already won. Margaret Williams was no longer crying. She just stood there, watching her son's retreating figure, her eyes devoid of any love, replaced instead with pure, unfiltered disappointment. Beside her, Ethan's father merely shook his head before turning away and walking out of the church. One by one, the remaining guests began to rise. Some bowed their heads and left in silence while others pulled out their phones, already dialing their lawyers, no doubt to ensure they weren't unknowingly tangled in any part of the scandal. But I didn't care about them. I just stood there, in my black dress, quietly observing the ruins of a life I had orchestrated to collapse. Today was supposed to be my wedding day. Instead, it was the day Ethan Williams and every last one of his accomplices paid the price. I didn't walk down the aisle as a bride, but I walked out of that church as the victor. As the church emptied, guests left in hushed whispers, clutching their phones, making frantic calls to their attorneys, perhaps fearing they too might be implicated in the scandal. Outside, a swarm of financial reporters stood waiting, microphones pointed at the church doors, eager to capture the next breaking headline. I stepped outside and took a deep breath. The weather was perfect. The sun cast a warm, golden glow over the cobblestone streets, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded inside. Olivia walked up beside me, her phone screen glowing with incoming messages. "The news is spreading even faster than we expected," she said, holding up her phone. A headline from the Wall Street Journal flashed across the screen in bold letters. "The wedding scandal of the century. Top lawyer Ethan Williams faces charges for financial fraud and insider trading." Below it were a series of photos from the ceremony: Ethan in handcuffs, Allison in full panic mode, Michael attempting to disappear into the crowd before being stopped by the FBI. But the largest photo of all was of me, standing tall in my elegant black dress, my expression resolute. "Just as planned," I murmured. 2 days after the wedding, I received a call from Richard Palmer, the CEO of Jensen & Marks, the law firm where Ethan had once been a rising star, before his downfall. "We've reviewed all the documents you sent," Richard Palmer said, his voice heavy. "We're fully cooperating with investigators to examine all the cases Ethan handled. But I need to ask you one thing." I already knew what he was about to say. "The Williams family charity will remain untouched," I interrupted, my voice firm. "I made sure all fraudulent financial transactions were tied solely to Ethan's personal accounts. Their foundation is clean." Silence. Then Richard sighed. "I don't understand why you still want to protect it." I smirked. "Just because Ethan and Allison are frauds doesn't mean the hundreds of children relying on their charity should suffer for it." After a pause, Richard simply responded, "You are a formidable woman, Charlotte." In the days that followed, every financial, legal, and real estate firm connected to Ethan, Allison, and Michael became the focus of federal investigations. Jensen & Marks fired Ethan immediately and launched an internal review of every case he had handled. 1 week later, they released an official statement, declaring their full cooperation with authorities and reassuring clients that their interests would be protected. Allison lost her job at the investment firm the same day she was arrested. Clients withdrew their funds, en masse, throwing the firm into a PR crisis so severe that they had no choice but to publicly sever ties with her and pledge full transparency in the investigation. Michael, once a rising name in real estate, was now facing multiple money laundering charges. Every project he was involved in was frozen overnight. His reputation? Completely destroyed. Within a week, the 3 people who had once believed they could manipulate my life had lost everything. The only person who walked away with something good from this scandal? Madison, the actress who had played my role at the wedding. After the video of the ceremony went viral, directors and film producers started reaching out to her. One of her texts to me was filled with excitement. "Charlotte, I just got an audition for a detective thriller. Who would have thought pretending to be a fake bride would be my big career break?" I smiled as I replied, "I always knew you were a talented actress, but your greatest role? Helping me pull this off." I returned to my job at the museum, where people no longer looked at me with pity but with admiration. Instead of reprimanding me for the scandal, the museum's board respected how I handled the situation. One of the senior directors, David Lancaster, even approached me with an idea for a special exhibit. "Deception through history," he said. I think you're the perfect person to curate an exhibition on some of history's greatest betrayals. I chuckled. Can I title it, The Truth Always Wins? My story spread like wildfire across the media. The New York Times called me the woman who refused to be fooled. CNN ran a special feature on how I had gathered evidence and exposed a massive financial fraud on my own wedding day. On Twitter, the hashtag Charlotte Wasn't Fooled trended for days, as thousands of women shared their own stories of betrayal and reclaiming their power. But to me, it was never about the fame. It was about justice. Ethan, Allison, and Michael were held accountable. The charity remained intact. I went back to work stronger than ever. And most importantly, I took back control of my life. Charlotte's story isn't just about revenge, it's a lesson in justice, resilience, and self-empowerment. In real life, not everyone gets the chance to expose a betrayal on their wedding day. But this story serves as a reminder that the truth always finds a way to come out. In love, in work, in life, never let anyone manipulate your fate. Betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise above it does. And sometimes, the best revenge is success.